Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Muse. I am Abbey Fernandez, and today we have truly two very special guests with us, the living legend Dolores Huerta and the director of the documentary film Dolores, Peter Bratt. Thank you all so much for having us here with you.
No, thank you for being here.
No, thank you. Dolores, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm very, very embarrassed to admit this. I didn't know who you were past a couple of months ago. And, you know, being Mexican, having my parents come from Tamaulipas, Mexico, I was so sad about that. I was so disappointed in my school system. I was so disappointed in my teachers. I was so disappointed in myself because how did I not know about you, Dolores? How? And so I sat there sad, but then I started thinking, and I watched your documentary. I watched a bunch of interviews about you. I was so obsessed with knowing about you because you truly are a hero, a living hero. And I mean that with the most respect and the most honesty, really. Not because you're here, Dolores, with me, but I truly do mean that. And so something that penetrated really deeply with me was, you know, your feminism and how it sort of abrupted, you know, when you moved over to New York to do the boycott and sort of that started in, and you had a lot more history before that. But I did want to ask you something that really popped in, and we're going to go into the questions because I have so much to ask you. You said in your living self-portrait interview that when Cesar Chavez, you know, he asked you to go to his house and you guys talked about starting this together because otherwise it wouldn't have happened. But later on when it sort of picked up, he told you, hey, Dolores, one of us has to be the spokesperson of this, you know, campaign or this movement. And he said, I think I'd be the best bet for this. And you said, yes, well, you know, that's how we all were taught to do that. I want to ask you, Dolores, how different do you think that the UFW history would have played out had you been the sole spokesperson of that movement?
It's funny because that thought never ever occurred to me. Looking back at that conversation that we had, and I didn't have on my feminist lens at that moment, I think I would have said to Cesar, well, you know, we can actually do it 50-50. You be the spokesperson sometimes and I can be the spokesperson. But actually, when I was on the Great Boycott, and this is like 4 years that I spent in New York City, you know, organizing the Great Boycott, I was a spokesperson because Cesar wasn't around, you know. So it was only like back in California, again, there where, you know, Cesar was the main spokesperson for the organization. But I think it's something that we as women, we just are not thinking of that. And I can give you another really good example. You know, I did the Great Boycott. I came back to California and I negotiated all the contracts, you know, with the growers. And the day that they were going to be signing the contracts, and there's that great photo of that moment this is after the boycott, and in the movie, and I was sitting next to Cesar, and Brother Larry Itliong, our Filipino vice president, came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, is it okay if I sit here? And I got up and I gave him my seat. I thought, oh my God, I would never have done that in today's world. I would have said, no, Larry, get another seat for yourself. I'm not giving up my seat because I just spent like the last 4 years of my life on the boycott and, you know, all the time on the strike and all that. I had a great, you might say, contribution to get to this moment. Why should I give up my seat?
No, and I mean, like I mentioned, being Mexican, we are taught this way, right? My mom wasn't like that. On the contrary, my dad did all the cooking, you know, it wasn't really like that. But my grandparents certainly were. And, you know, even when I got married, and I got married at a young age, my mother-in-law would tell me, why don't you cook? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And so how did you get out of that? I know that when you went over there to New York, like we mentioned before, this sort of grew on you. And you had a couple of things that you weren't in agreement with the feminist movement back then. But how did you grow out from that huge Mexican, you know, heritage that we come from? You know, how do you grow from that? How do you step away from that?
Well, actually, my mother was a feminist, and my mother, because I am fifth generation in the United States of America, you know, my great-grandfather's film shows was in the Union Army during the Civil War. And my mother was a total feminist. My brothers had to cook and clean the same way that I did. My brothers were much better cooks than I am. And, you know, they had to do the dishes and mop the floors and everything. We were an equal opportunity a person in terms of when it came to the household. But the big thing, you might say I guess getting rid of that colonized mentality of domination by men I think happened when, in terms of the issue of abortion, because that was the one I had to struggle with, to really understand that the science behind that is that actually, a fetus has life when it's born. And that was the hardest thing. And again, because of the traditions that were taught in the Catholic Church, et cetera. And then when we look back at all of the teachings of the Catholic Church, the earth was flat, you shouldn't get a divorce, you can't have birth control, et cetera, et cetera. So, coming to that realization, which is such a tenet of the feminist movement, that a woman has control over her own body. And I think that, and then when we think about that you have a control over your own body, you have control over your own life, that then no woman should let herself be dominated by anyone, especially a man.
Yes, I love this. Yes, Dolores, yes. So, Peter, I want to ask you, now that I'm super familiar with you, I feel like I've stalked you, these last in the least creepiest way. Dolores has done so much. Like, it's insane. I really can't even fathom to get another word of how marvelous, you are as a human being.
It's awe-inspiring, isn't it?
Man, I can't even begin to tell you. I want to know, you were the writer, the producer, the director. You did it all. How was that process like for you? Sitting down and thinking, gosh, I have an hour and 36 minutes to sort of compile, Dolores Huerta's entire life into who she is, and, still the living legend. How was that process like for you?
It was a long process. The film took five years to make, and I think at first I was completely intimidated and overwhelmed with the approach that this is a historical biopic. And I think the thing that shifted for me was, okay, I have to put my writer hat on and say, how is this a compelling drama about a very heroic and complex figure? And so once I started looking at it as a story and how to engage an audience, it totally shifted for me. And then, of course, in the interview process, I learned that Dolores was a jazz aficionado, and that she actually trained as a professional dancer, and that her passion was originally to be a professional dancer. And once I had that, I felt like, oh my God, I have the artistic way into how to tell this compelling, interesting story.
Music itself. So you said it took 5 years to sort of get this together. Take me through real quick what kind of dilemmas, maybe conflicts you guys came across, sort of trying to bring this out to the public.
Can I say that I actually feel very, very guilty, because this documentary is so powerful and it's so important at this moment in our time. It's so relevant, and I feel very guilty because I really have to say that I wasn't very supportive of the film crew. I could have, been a lot more, engaged in what they were doing. So they really have to take credit for all of the whole movie, because I really have to say that my contribution was very, very minimal in this documentary. And the archival footage that they had in there, things that I had never seen before. And so all of the kudos have to go to Peter and to Carlos for making this film. And of course to the many farm workers that suffered and were arrested and that were killed in the movement, 5 martyrs that were there. So I just have to, it's a kind of a confessional, I might say, in terms of, so I'm really grateful.
Dolores,
That's so humble.
Dolores is a true organizer and activist, because we say, hey, Dolores, we're making this movie. She says, well, you got to follow me because I'm working. Yeah. And so, we literally did. We stalked her.
We do. We're all obsessed with you, Dolores. Yeah. That is honestly very, very humble of you. Gosh, to have such a powerful, and I know these sort of words are so intense to use the words like powerful and but you truly are. Seeing back everything you've done, and I want to rewatch this again, and I want to show everybody about this. You guys did a fantastic job. I can't begin to accentuate how enormous this is going to be. It already is, but it is, like you said, Dolores, the perfect timing. I feel like had this come out any other time, it would have been great. Mm-hmm. But I feel that what we're going through right now as a society, worldwide, we need to know about people like you, Dolores, not as women.
It's a call to action right now.
So lastly here, because I'm telling you, I want to ask you all so many questions, but I know that you have very busy lives. I want to know briefly, Dolores, about that experience you had in San Francisco. I was heartbroken, and I'm glad you put that in there, because I feel like we don't see that sort of play out in a lot of movies when they're heroic movies, right? Something like this, right? We don't see sort of the actual brutality that you went. And in one of your interviews that they asked you, you said that that was sort of the initial component of why you joined the organization at the beginning was because of the brutality that was happening to these Mexican Americans and blacks and all these people. You saw it unfair and you said, I want to be a part of that organization, right? So tell me a little bit about what it was like laying in bed for all that time thinking, what's going to happen next?
It was interesting because, there's one of the women that you see in that film, an African American woman. She was standing on the corner waiting for the bus, and they grabbed her, and she was one of the victims that got beat up by the police on that day. And subsequently to that, in San Francisco, they had to change some of the ordinances so that the police could not just come and just attack a crowd the way that they did. So some good came out of it. And that's one thing as an organizer, I just have to confess, when you see all of these negative policies and negative things that are happening, like right now with Donald Trump as the president of the United States, you have to say, this is an organizing opportunity because, people that have not been engaged, that have not been active are now reflecting. And as that line in the movie also, I know these great lines where Senator Robert Kennedy says, we have a responsibility to our fellow citizens. And I think that's what the movie says. Like Peter says, it's a call to action. It's for people to get engaged. And I'm glad that you opened up with saying that you hadn't heard of any of the work that I had been doing. And I think that's really what we have in our society right now. We have this abysmal ignorance. And so, people that are the neo-Nazis and the alt-right, they have never been taught about the contributions of the indigenous people of the United States that were the first slaves, or the African slaves that built the White House or the Congress, or the contributions of the immigrants, that built the infrastructure of our country, people from Asia, from Mexico. And they did all of the hard work of tilling the fields and building the railroads and doing all the great work that makes this country great. And so I hope that also with this movie that we can make people understand that we've got to take over our educational system and improve them and make sure that we get all of this history, not only of immigrants' rights, but women's rights, LGBT rights, that's got to be, labor rights have got to be part of our education from kindergarten so that then we won't grow any more neo-Nazis.
Peter,
I actually think the conflict that's happening right now is so connected to what the film speaks about. The alt-right they're upset, and part of what their agenda is they want to take back, or as Trump mentioned last night in Phoenix, preserve our heritage and our culture. And I think what we've seen, what was an outgrowth of Dolores' work in the 60s and 70s was that all these other stories that are part of the American narrative, they've been left out. And so after the 60s and 70s, we started hearing those parts of the story that had been left out. And it caused a reaction on the other side. You're changing the story, or you're changing the history. And we want to make this, you're taking away our European values and our European culture. And so I think it's perceived as a threat. But in truth, the United States, it's a complex history that involves many, many different kinds of people that came and are part of the fabric. And Dolores' story is a really incredible example of that.
Yes, it truly is. Peter, having you here, I want to ask you, this documentary film is set to release September 1st, God willing. So what are you expecting from the people out there? What do you think is going to happen after this is released?
Well, the thing I want to say is the film opens September 1st in New York. It opens September 8th in LA and in other cities across the country. And Dolores' story will still be unknown unless people come out and support it. It's a small independent film. We don't have a huge $1 million budget to put it in multiplexes across the country. So if it's going to stay alive, people have to come out and support it. So I really want to say to Latino people, please come and support. Tell all your friends and family. Go to DoloresMovie.com, go to our Facebook page, tweet, and get the word out about this film. If people come and see the film, you'll see more stories about our gente.
Yeah. And I think it's important not only for Latinos, I think it's really important for our Anglo audiences also to see this, especially when we come to the issue of nonviolence. We know that there's been a lot of huge demonstrations right now, and we know a lot of the demonstrators that are out there, they are not people of color, they're Caucasians, they're Anglos that are out there also fighting for the lives of Black Lives Matter, fighting for immigrants, etc. And to really understand and to really practice the whole idea of nonviolence. This is so important. reminding people that Gandhi won the independence of India through nonviolence, and this is the way that we also have to win these justice wars, you might say, using nonviolence, and to remember that. And if people use violence, then of course they're joining the Nazis when they do that. And also the voting, because when it comes down to the very end, the only way we can change policies and practices is to vote, to support progressive candidates, to run for office ourselves, right? Even if we don't really know how to do it, you learn on the job. You know, and I say that also for the women who are most reluctant, and that to understand that this is in our hands, that we have to take the power, that we have the power, but then we have to exercise it, because if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yes.
Or become reporters.
Or become reporters. Well, I'm truly honored. I can't say it enough. We'll be sure to put all your social media tags and everything so people can follow along. And you be sure that I will be a true follower of this. And I will encourage everybody, because you have touched me in an unbelievable way, both of you, really. And so I want to thank you so much, Dolores Huerta. I get teary, and I'm not going to do this, but I really am honored to be in your presence. And Peter, I mean, obviously you brought this film to life, so we have to thank you. I'm speechless, really. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
And, you know, we're still organizing at the grassroots level. We just settled a big lawsuit with the current high school district for the suspension and expulsion of African American and Latino students. And we're also in 7 different school districts right now organizing parents to be able to get quality education for their children. They want to know about the work of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. We're at DoloresHuerta.org. That's DOLORESHUERTA.org. And by the way, my maiden name is Fernandez.
Yes! You are.
You have just been organized by Dolores Huerta.
We are from the same family. Imagine, that would be insane. No, but thank you all again so much. It has been a true honor. I can't emphasize that so much. Thank you all for watching this today. Please be sure to follow the movement, follow Dolores, and follow Peter in all their anything they do. Please be sure to tune along. The Latino community, we need you. We need everybody. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch more coverage from MUSE.